In the area of licensing, DevTest has transitioned from a license enforcement model to an honor-based compliance model. Starting with DevTest 8, Enterprise Dashboard is enabled by default and a mandatory component. It also needs to be activated using a license file. None of the other DevTest components need to talk to a license server or need to access a license file like earlier versions did. During installation, a license file is required to install the Enterprise Dashboard component. The registry components can be installed and get licensed when they connect to the Enterprise Dashboard. Other components need no licensing. They connect to a registry, but the registry has to be activated by the Enterprise Dashboard. An Enterprise Dashboard can have multiple registries attached to it. ACLs are now enabled by default and cannot be disabled. This means users must log in to use any DevTest product functions. Administrators have the ability to allow or restrict users accessing different DevTest capabilities. Usage metrics are collected per user, and the administrator has access to reports that provide visibility into license compliance. Note that peak counts are displayed in the Enterprise Dashboard, and an export of usage audit data is available here. This is described in much greater detail in the online user documentation and the DevTest community blog posts. We recommend that you review the licensing frequently asked questions in the documentation. In the rest of this demonstration, we're going to show two things: how to change passwords on the default accounts and how to create a new user with a superuser role. One thing to note here: since the Service Console was retired in Release 9.5, the ACL administration functionality, among other things, have been moved to the DevTest Portal. Accessing the old Service Console URL provides this screen detailing where to find these functions. So let's open the DevTest Portal, which as of DevTest Solutions 9.5 contains the access control user interface. And under Settings, we've got Access Control. Notice that roles, users, resource groups, and resources can be selected. Roles provide a convenient way to group privileges and access to resources. There are predefined roles, but you can add your own. For example, the superuser role provides all privileges. So if we select superuser, you can see the privileges, superuser privileges assigned here. There's a large number, obviously. And guests, for example, provides a minimal set. So if we look at the guest user, you can see that the only functions available for DevTest Workstation for guest user is Start DevTest Workstation, View a Suite, and View a Test Case. Resources are the DevTest components, which can be scoped per role. And you can see in our case we have the coordinator, we have simulator east and west, and we have the VSE. These resources can also be placed in resource groups for easy handling. Now let's look at users. There are default users provided out of the box. One of those users happens to be admin, which I've been using to log in with. The default users actually have default passwords associated with them, and the password is the same as the user ID. So for example, the login for admin would be to specify username admin and password admin. Sysadmin would be the same. Username sysadmin, password sysadmin. We recommend that you change these passwords after you complete the installation. To do this, you click on the options icon for each user ID. Let's try CAA Power, for example. You select Set Password. You change the password. Let's change the password to, let's say, Test2. And you click Save. Okay, so let's say you want to create a new account for yourself with the role of superuser. What you would do is click Add User, give yourself a user ID, password, and optionally specify a description and name and select a role or roles. We'll use a user ID of Stephen. We'll use the name of the person will be Stephen. For the password, what we'll specify is ampersand DevTest Rocks, and repeat it here. Okay, we'll specify superuser role, click that, move it over here, and then we click Save. And at that point, you can see from the portal that a user has been added named Stephen. So let's test this now, verify that it works. We'll close and reopen the portal. And as you can see, we've logged into the portal using the username and password. Now, if we look at settings, you can see that everything's actually accessible here. All of the reporting, the ability to create things, right? The ability to monitor server health, for example, and the different components and how they're working. So this user does indeed have complete access to the system. So to summarize, what we've just done is we discussed DevTest licensing and ACLs. We showed you how to change the default account passwords, and we created a new user with the super user role.